Good morning, everybody. We're thrilled that you're here with us this morning as we bring to you an East Coast versus West Coast virtual farm tour. This is being brought to you by the Beef Checkoff. So we're going to head out to the farm where we have Amy Hess of Bow Creek Farm and Sallie Miller of Croissant Red Angus from Colorado. So we're just going to kick it off. Again, just welcome all of you classrooms joining us live and those tuning into the recording. So with that, we'll have Amy introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Amy Hess, and I'm of Bow Creek Farm and Cattle Company, and I live here on the farm with my husband Rob and my two kids, Levi and Anna, and we have a cow-calf operation raising registered Red Angus cows, and we also feed out about 60 to 80 steers a year and finish those animals and sell the beef directly to customers and as wholesale to different restaurants.
Good morning, I am Sallie Miller from northeastern Colorado, and so we also have a registered Red Angus cow-calf operation where we have about 300 cows that we have every year. And here in just a second you will see a video from our place so you can see some Colorado scenery in October.
Short grass plains of northeastern Colorado, Kevin and Sallie Miller are evaluating their recently weaned Red Angus bulls for sale potential.
We run about 250 cows, give or take, depending on what Mother Nature provides us. We do it on about 10,000 acres. So if you do the math, that's about 42 acres per cow-calf pair for 8 months, because we still have to feed 4 months out of the year. Because when you look around and you see the short grass prairie that we're in, it doesn't stick around very long. So, you know, it's challenging at that aspect, but if it was easy, everybody'd do it.
We have a bull sale every spring, and where we sell 60 to 75 bulls a year. And then the bulls and heifers that do not make replacements, we have a small feed yard that we will usually finish them out in the feed yard. That way we can collect the genetic data, the carcass data, to help improve our herd.
Genetic improvement is a priority at Croissant Red Angus, and an emphasis on balanced trait selection helps them to produce the best possible seed stock for their customers.
We attack genetics from both sides a little bit. Larry, our partner in this deal, Sallie's dad, he looks at things from the feed yard side quite a bit, but I also look at things from the cow-calf side of it a lot, and I deal with the cows more than I do the feed yard. But at the end of the day, we have to meet in the middle and make those genetics work, because from a commercial rancher's operation, that's exactly what they have to do. They have to meet in the middle. So we are looking for females that can survive in a semi-arid environment and then be able to produce a calf. A cow has a job description everywhere, and I would say here it is for you to bring in a calf every year and to provide a seed stock calf at least 2 out of 3 years. And so that incorporates all the genetic component that we'll talk about here, but it also incorporates in, you know, growth and the other elements that, you know, docility, things like that. And then the other side of it is, you know, we're in the beef industry. We want to create tasty, nutritious products for our consumers. And so that side of it, we look at carcass traits very much so. And, you know, marbling is one of those, you know, big ticket items, because, you know, that's where the taste in beef comes out.
Kevin and Sallie's cattle produce and reproduce in environments and with challenges similar to what their bull customers face.
Our goal starts with the cows, because the people buying our bulls, they need some cow herd efficiency traits, you know, reproductive efficiency, some feed efficiency as well. But when I sit down and look at the goals of our operation, I think they're very closely mirrored within most of our commercial customers. Within our system, we try to manage our entire cow herd as what commercial customers would.
Perfect. So now that we kind of have a background of where you both come from, we're just going to have you guys talk about the beef life cycle and the different components that you're both involved with.
So I will start us off. We'll talk about when you hear a cow-calf operation, that is where the farmer has a cow herd that they maintain, and those cows have a calf every year. And then they raise those calves. The calves are born somewhere between 60 and 100 pounds. And then they will be with their mom. Basically, they will drink their mother's milk. They'll eat a little bit of grass out on pasture for the first 6 to 9 months of their life. At that point in time, they're weaned, and the calves can either go back out to pasture, they can go to a feed yard and be just fed at a feed yard, or some combination depending on the resources available. As you can see here, we have a cow and a calf in this pen. And also, I don't know if can you pan over here, there are some cows in this pasture over here, and their calves are a little older. They're getting close to being weaned. Generally, we wean animals anywhere from 6 to 10 months of age. After an animal is weaned from its mother, we will move it to another pasture where it'll stay there. It can stay there for another 2 months. Some people call that backgrounding. A lot of people that raise cow-calves, their calves will go off and actually be sold to a backgrounder who will keep that animal on pasture. They might start feeding it some grain. We do all of that here on our farm ourselves. So again, like I said, between 6 and 10 months of age, they'll go into what we call our feed barn. It's a barn with a roof, but it has open sides. You can see over here, there's some animals here eating at the feed bunk. And I don't know if you can see it in the video, but in the back there's a curtain, and that curtain raises. So we like to have as much airflow in our barn as possible. And this is best for the cattle. So all of these animals are a little bit older than a year old. And they've been in here probably for about 3 months. Once we start feeding them, we'll slowly transition them to not only eating dry grass hay, but also eating a grain mixture. And that mixture has corn, soybeans, there's some barley in there, soy hulls, and different vitamins and minerals.
So ladies, we had a question come in. Some of the students are just wondering what exactly it means for a calf to be weaned.
When we wean a calf, it means removing it from its mother so it will no longer drink her milk. There's many different theories of the best way to do that. What we do is called fence line weaning. Well, we'll separate the animals in 2 different pastures, but they have a fence row to still touch noses and talk to each other. So it's a little more natural for them. And that usually takes 2 to 3 days until they're ready to be separated. And then we'll remove them so that they can't see each other and move them to different pastures.
Perfect. And you touched a little bit about the feedlot, and we kind of saw that. So now if you guys want to just move into a little bit of how you go about selecting the genetics and maybe the importance of what all that means in terms of producing the beef and producing the animals that are standing behind you.
So when we talk about selecting genetics, we're talking about looking at the bulls that we mate with our cows to produce the qualities that we want. And so we take data, including birth weight and weaning weight. We will measure different aspects of the animal, how it grows, how much it eats, to determine what bulls we mate with which cows. We're very careful. We try not to mate a bull back to its relative because we don't want inbreeding. So there's some of those selections to make the best quality beef, but also produce a cow that can survive in the environment that it is growing in. A cow here where it's got nice green, lush grass, it is a little bit different than a cow at our place that doesn't have as much lush grass. We have a harder, drier grass that they eat.
Perfect. So Amy, do you want to touch a little bit about what you guys do there at Bow Creek and just talk a little bit about the differences given the resources available to you?
Sure. Right now, we have about 41 adult cows who have had calves. We generally calve in both the spring and the fall. We sort of divide our herd in half to calve in those two separate seasons. Right now, most of our cows are a little far away from here. I don't know if you can see them down at the end of the pasture. But like I said, we do have a few here right now. And again, these are older calves that you're looking at. They are almost 6 months of age.
Perfect. And then can we go back a little bit to the feedlot segment and maybe talk about some of the differences here in Pennsylvania versus Colorado? Maybe Sallie can just touch on a little bit about the differences in how they finish their cattle, maybe the different feedstuffs that they use.
So in Colorado, we don't have our feedlot is not covered like it is here. We are all open barn or open pens. In some areas they will have shades, some parts of the country, but we do not have shades. So we will feed corn silage, which is a lot wetter, along with some corn, some hay, and then the byproducts from brewing beer or ethanol production, those are things, and soybean hulls or cottonseed hulls, they could go to the landfill, but instead the cattle are able to utilize those byproducts in their diet. We have a nutritionist that makes sure that everything is nutritionally balanced for the diet, so that they actually will eat a better nutritionally balanced diet than I do.
So can you just touch on, maybe how you balance those diets? Are there folks that you work with to make sure that you're feeding the right amounts of each feed?
Yeah. In our part of the country, as Sallie said, we feed a little differently. Our farm, our primary business used to be growing hay. So what we do is, since we make a lot of dry hay, that is the roughage portion of their diet. And as you said, we always work with a nutritionist. We have a proprietary feed ration that you got to see there, that a nutritionist looks at and analyzed the nutritional value of our hay, and then added the appropriate amounts of corn and soybeans to come up with the rest of the protein and calcium and other nutrients that these animals need. And as Sallie mentioned, there are lots of different feeds you can feed cattle, and that depends regionally on where you live and what you have available. We don't do it currently, but as far as feeding byproducts from other industries and other foods, I live in central Pennsylvania. It's the snack food capital of the world. So there are lots of feeders that finishing barns that will feed a portion of their ration will be broken chips and pretzels. And I live in Hershey, Pennsylvania. That's where we have lots of chocolate. So there's lots of chocolate that doesn't make the cut. It's not wrapped right, it's broken. That can actually be mixed into the feed ration for cattle and help lower the environmental footprint of chocolate as well.
Perfect. That's so cool how you guys kind of utilize some of those different components. And again, just they're local to you, so it's easy for you all to get them and use them, and like you said, gives them a second purpose.
Yeah, and I don't think I mentioned before that in a feedlot, our goal is to finish the animal to a certain weight. Generally, that's between 12 and 1,400 pounds. We personally like to get them to about 1,300 pounds, so they have the right amount of finish. When they do, they have appropriate marbling. Our goal is to produce a very high quality beef, so marbling is very important to us, and we can really get some great marbling with the feed that we are finishing on.
So we had a question pop in. Can you guys explain what marbling is and what it means in terms of eating beef, the product?
Marbling is the fat that is inside the meat. It's not on the outside of the muscle. It's what gets intermixed inside the muscle. So when you see a steak and there's the little streaks of white in the steak. That would be the marbling. And so that gives the meat flavor, and the marbling is what determines the quality of the product for the eating experience.
Thank you.
And some differences with how we feed. Sallie, you probably use a TMR mixer. Do you mix feed?
We do. Everything is totally mixed together in a wagon and put in a bunk, because we have at our high time we'll have 500 head of calves on feed to be fed out to finish, along with the bull calves, about 80 bull calves, and our replacement heifers, which will have 50 to 60 replacement heifers. So we feed them all in the feedlot.
So as I said, we're feeding, as compared to Sallie, we're only feeding 60 to 80 head a year. For us, we would love to have a TMR mixer to mix our dry hay in with our corn ration, but financially and economically, it doesn't make sense for us right now. The cost of the mixer, the added time that it would take to do that for us, if we ever start finishing more animals, that's definitely something we would look at.
The benefit of that TMR mixer is, for us, it enables us to incorporate some feed that they don't maybe like so much. Take it as if you're trying to get them to eat broccoli and ice cream at the same time. You know, they'd always pick the ice cream if they could, but we want them to eat broccoli too. So if we mix it all together, they have a hard time picking out what they don't like.
I'm sure a lot of the students tuning in can definitely relate with that. We'd all always choose ice cream over broccoli.
Or chocolate, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's right. So moving on, maybe we can go back to genetics a little bit and maybe talk about the differences. I know in the short video clip we played in the beginning, Sallie, it talked about how you guys sell bulls each year at a sale. Maybe we can just give students a little insight into what all that means and maybe why you guys go to the effort of hosting a sale and how that is all part of your story.
So yeah, with our herd, we for our area, we are actually a smaller producer, and so by having the bull sale, we can add some value to our calves that we're selling. We raise the bulls that they're sold at just a little over a year old, to go to other producers and breed cows for them. So it's one of the ways that we can, it's just a different marketing strategy. Here, they market all their beef to through straight to market, versus we sell ours when they're finished to a processor to keep them, to do different channels with.
Perfect. Yeah, and the students can learn more about the different channels that beef is marketed in a farm tour that we actually held last week and is available on our website.
And I don't know, now might be a good time to mention why we direct market beef ourselves. We are a very small farm. We only have, like I said, finishing between 60 to 80 animals a year. The actual margins, profit margins that you receive on each finished animal are pretty low. For us to be economically viable as a small farm, we have to find a way to make more dollars off of every animal and every acre that we have. So we chose to direct market beef to consumers. Some of that is through wholesale sales to different hotels and restaurants, but we also have a small farm store here on the farm. And again, it's mainly, we chose to do that as a way to make our farm viable. I know, I mean, when you have more acres and more animals, you maybe don't have to put in so much time to market that actual beef as we do, because it takes a lot of time. It's a whole nother area that we had to invest in.
It still takes a lot of time though, because as you mentioned, the profit margins still are real small. The cost of land is really high, and so
let's talk about that. Can we compare?
Sure.
What is the average price for farmland in Colorado?
And there's going to be a difference, because just the pasture ground that's not irrigated, will be $700 to $900 an acre, depending on what part of Colorado. Farm ground that's just dry crop, where you grow it, but you can actually grow crops,
would be closer to $1,000 to $1,500 an acre.
Okay.
But then if you have irrigation water, it'll be $5,000, $7,000 an acre. But then there's the recreational value. If you get closer to the mountains,
Okay.
the price of land just goes up because recreation.
Around here, where we are, our ground is good for crops, but not fantastic. So farmland is actually $10,000 an acre. Just 15 miles south of here, and closer to Lancaster County, farmland can be as much as $18,000 an acre.
Right. And yeah, so that's where, if you get to closer to the city, closer, somewhere in, it does get more expensive just because of being able to commute to town for jobs and that sort of thing.
And the other aspect for you to direct market beef, how close do you live to proximity to a population that could support that sort of business?
We are an hour away from somewhere that would be where we would be able to market beef directly. So we would have to take our beef to a farmer's market or to a retail store.
And you'd have to travel quite a distance.
We would have to travel an hour.
Wow.
Yeah. So it makes a difference because nobody's going to come to our place. It's too far away.
Yeah, we are very lucky. We live in a highly populated area. We have some big cities around like Harrisburg and Lancaster, and Hershey is pretty big as well. So we couldn't sell directly to customers unless we had that population near us.
One of the other differences is Amy mentioned, she's got 40 and I have close to 300 cows. However, we run on 10,000 acres versus she's got.
And actually, I think our pastures are about 65 acres.
So we have about 40 acres per cow-calf pair.
And we have about 1.6 acres per cow-calf pair. Quite a difference.
So for some of our younger students tuning in, is that major difference? Obviously, we can all see about 2 versus 40 some. That's a huge difference. And maybe you can just explain a little bit about why. Is that related to the rainfall you get, the types of grasses that grow?
It's going to be mainly rainfall. We only get about 12, sorry, this is eating me, 12 inches a year. And so we don't, and then we still have to feed during the winter because it doesn't grow. A lot of times it gets covered in snow.
Yeah, and we get about 41 inches of rain a year. So there's a huge difference there. And last year was one of our wettest years on record. And we received over 66 inches of water. And that all came from the months of July through about November. So it was pretty stressful here last year. We had some flooding issues to deal with, which definitely impacted our operation. It caused animals to not have, their grass was almost diluted in nutrients. So it was harder to keep them with a good body condition score. We had to give them some extra grass and extra hay and even supplement them with some corn and some things that we don't normally need to do with cows. Usually our problem is we're trying to make sure our cows are not too heavy. But last winter we had a problem with them being too skinny. And you must have a lot more, I mean, we worry about too much water here, but you probably worry about drought.
We do. We do have droughts in seems like every other year, and so that's where we have so much grass and we buy a lot of hay to bring in to feed over the winter. And if we've had to in the past, there was a year where we had to bring all the cows in. Usually our feedlot is empty during the summer. We had to bring the cows in for the summer and just feed them hay because we didn't have enough grass.
Mm-hmm.
So that gets pretty expensive.
Right, I can imagine. Yeah. So like I said, with our business, most of our sales used to be in dry hay. And here we can probably have animals on grass until late November if we're lucky. During the winter, we'll move most of the cows to what we call a sacrifice area. It'll be a small pasture where we either have some concrete that they can have some feed on, or it's a place where we don't mind if the pasture gets torn up. Our big concern usually is having cows in mud, and when it's frozen in ice, you can imagine a 1,200 to 14-pound cow. Her feet can leave quite divots in the ground, which becomes a little treacherous for them in the winter when it's frozen. So we're always glad in the spring, usually around late April, May 1st, we're able to get the cows back out on pasture again. And I think you saw the pasture you're looking at right now is actually one of the places where we wintered some young bulls. So the grass is not very high here. We just moved those cows there so you can see them. But in the fields out where they're at pasture, the grass is probably about a foot to 16 inches tall right now. And we'll rotationally graze our cows out there, and we'll go every day and we move their fence like 20 or 30 feet so they have more grass to eat every day.
So how does grazing look a little different in Colorado, Sallie? Maybe you can touch on, since you have such a large plot of land, how do you guys handle grazing?
So we actually have about 32 pastures that they're smaller to keep the cattle, so they will intensely graze one spot for a week to 2 weeks, and then we can move them. We have usually 4 pastures per water tank, so it's really easy to move them from one pasture to another. One person can go out and just move the gates, and they know that fresh grass is on the other side. And so they will just go on their own. But that's where we do make sure and rotate them around and so that they utilize the grass there appropriately. We try very hard not to overgraze. As you saw in the pictures, there was still grass left in October, because in our country, if you graze it all the way to the ground, it's going to take years to come back. So we make sure we only eat about half of the grass a year, or a little more that grows.
So that's the huge, So that's the huge reason behind why you're moving cattle so often, is just ensuring that you're not debilitating the grass to the point where it's not going to be able to regrow.
That's correct. And we have a lot of wildlife on our property. And so we kind of manage making sure that the birds have the cover in the right time of year. The antelope and the deer all like the water tanks, especially. And so, that provides them fresh water as well. So we make sure and manage a little bit for them as well.
Speaking of wildlife, do you have more of a concern about predators?
We do. We had some coyote issues, especially this year. We had some coyote issues with the snow that we had in March. The coyotes definitely were a problem. And that's the main predator that we have to deal with, though.
Okay. And actually, interesting you said that. I would have thought it would have been some different animals, but we do have coyotes here as well. And while we've never had a problem with them on our farm, they're pretty shy. They stay in the woods. We do have some neighbors that have had some damage to their calves from coyotes.
So do you ladies each want to share one unique challenge that you face from where you're located? I know we've kind of touched on that all throughout, but maybe share with the students one unique challenge that you think is really unique to you and where you're located.
Well, I would guess for us, it's the harsh weather conditions that we sometimes face. We will calve in late March, all through March. And this year we had -20 temperatures for a couple days, and then we had a blizzard for a couple days. It can take a lot of work to try and make sure those calves are safe and warm and protected. And then we go to 100 degrees in July, and so that harsh just changes can sometimes be a challenge.
And I'd say for me, it's definitely our rainfall, the moisture. My priority is to make sure my animals are living a stress-free life. In the pasture, that's not always as pleasant as it might seem. There are days where it's sunny and hot. There are flies, there's mud, there's ice. That's why once we choose to finish an animal, we bring it inside of our barn where it's under cover from the rain. We feel like we can control their environment better and actually make it less stress-free for them. They have all the food they want to eat. They have easy access to water. And again, this barn is on top of a hill, And so, like I said, usually the curtains are open behind us, so there's plenty of airflow. We kept them shut today because there was a chance of thunderstorm. But in addition to that, like I said, they have plenty of food to eat. If we ever thought that it was too hot in here or there wasn't airflow, we could install fans. So having this under cover really helps us control their environment and take away stress for them.
Minimizing stress is definitely a priority for any cattle producer. The animals, you can tell when they're stressed, you can tell when they're happy and just content. And our goal is to keep them content in their environment, whatever environment they're in. That producer tries to keep them content and happy their entire life.
Because really, if we don't, that is going to have an economic factor on us. Stressed animals aren't going to gain weight as easily. They're not going to be as fertile and produce as many calves. So really, it's in the best interest of every producer to make sure their animals are stress-free. And there's different ways you can do that, like I said, about controlling their environment, but also things like vaccines and making sure they don't get diseases. Because as I said, I'm concerned about moisture, and where there's moisture, there's different bacteria and diseases that spread, different parasites. So those are all concerns that we have, and all of those things cause stress.
So if there's any time that you have to treat an animal if they're sick, or like you're saying, you might follow a specific vaccine protocol, do you guys just decide what you want to do, or do you work with a veterinarian?
What we do is we follow the beef quality assurance protocol, which is standards in the beef industry on cattle care, cattle management, cattle handling, but also when you have to administer any kind of vaccine or antibiotic or any other kind of medical treatment, we always consult our veterinarian and then and follow their instruction. But to make the event even as stress-free as possible, we have can you see the chute over here?
Yep, we can see it perfect.
We have this chute system over here that animals move through, and they go in there, and it squeezes them slightly just so they don't move around. It doesn't hurt or anything like that, just to keep them calm. And their head will actually come through this catch section in the front, and it just holds them there so we can, just don't forget, these are animals that are generally over 1,000 pounds. So we also want to make sure that not only are our cattle safe, but that we're safe as well. It's my husband and I here ourselves, so it becomes difficult to treat animals if you don't have a system like this. And so it gives us a place that if an animal's injured, we can see what's going on. We can have the vet come and take a look at them. For instance, this cow you see here in this pen, the reason she's here is just before she gave birth to her calf, she had a sore foot and she was limping. So we brought her in here so she didn't have to trudge through a pasture and walk a long distance for water or food, that she could kind of stay in here and recuperate until her foot healed.
Perfect. And maybe before we roll into question and answers with everybody joining us live, maybe if each of you just want to share a little bit about why you chose to raise Red Angus cattle. I mean, obviously, we heard and we see that both of you raise Red Angus. So maybe we can just touch a little bit about why you chose to raise Red Angus and what you're most proud of surrounding being involved in the beef industry.
Well, we chose to raise Red Angus. We had other breeds before Red Angus. We had finished some Black Angus steers in years past, and we had actually started raising Herefords. In 2004, we purchased our first Red Angus cows and fell in love with them. The Red Angus are known for their maternal traits and calving ease, but most of all, their docility. That is super important to Rob and I, again, because we're the only two working here. We need to be able to handle our animals quietly and calmly. And again, docility has a lot to do with lessening stress. If you have animals that are acting crazy and wild, that's not too stress-free for them.
So we started with Red Angus as a 4-H project for myself and my two brothers. However, we've stayed with it for the because of the fact of the docility, the maternal traits that come with that. They're such good mothers, but they also produce a very high quality product. In addition, the Red Angus breed has done a very good job of making sure their data that they collect is accurate and representative of the breed. And so we just like to make sure we're very data-driven people.
Right, and I don't think we mentioned that. So,
Yeah.
that there is actual genetics data that we keep on animals. They're called EPDs. It's actually a map of different traits, a quantitative analysis of the different genetic traits that we can measure in cattle. So every cow, every bull has a set of EPDs attached to them that gives you a lot of information that you can judge that animal against another Red Angus animal.
So that all just ties back to, like you were talking about in the genetic section, just how you mate animals to meet your goals.
Correct. You can look at the EPD and say, well, this bull will have a 3-pound lighter calf than this bull on average. Now, and so that's where you can look and say, okay, so these are heifers. I want to mate it to a lower birth weight bull, or these cows need some more growth, or there's lots of factors in there in those EPDs.
Right, and it all comes back to quality of beef as well. There's also carcass traits that you can look at, like marbling and ribeye size. So it's not just the maternal traits that we're looking at.
We like to make sure they're balanced, not get too heavy in one side or the other, just to make sure we're continuing to improve, but not go too heavy on one side.
So I think it's really impressive, the amount of science and data that you all are using. And it's just important to emphasize for all the students tuning in that, farmers are using all sorts of modern technologies and data to make sure that they're making decisions that ensure a high quality product at the end for you, the consumer, but also making sure that they're taking care of the cows and the calves and all of the animals on their farm to the best of their ability.
There's definitely a lot of science involved. From nutritionists to geneticists, soil scientists if we have a problem with a pasture, veterinarians. So there's all sorts of different science that goes into it.
Right, and universities are constantly studying different feeds, different medications. They're always coming up with better ways to analyze the genetic data that we have. So it's really an ongoing process. Things change all the time, and they usually for the better.
Yeah, right.
Wonderful. So at this time, if any schools have any questions that they want us to address and answer live, please feel free to put those in the chat box, in the Q&A box, and we'll be able to get those answered here in the final minutes of the farm tour. So maybe while we're waiting for a question or two to pop in, do each of you ladies, again, just want to touch on why you are so passionate and involved in the beef industry, and just some final words to share with the folks joining us.
It's just so important to educate and show consumers where their food comes from. What we're doing, we don't want to hide. It's just that we're a little bit removed from cities, so people don't maybe see it every day. We just like to show them what we're doing, let them know that it's a safe environment, what we're doing, and that the product is safe for them.
Perfect.
And I didn't grow up on a farm. Rob and I are both first-generation farmers. Rob started with cattle about 20 years ago, just before we got married. And so this has slowly been developing over time. But for me, it probably wasn't until I was about 40 that I realized I love beef and cattle, and it's my passion, along with having our shop on our farm. It's pretty exciting to get to have customers come in directly and talk to them about beef and about different cuts and how to cook those cuts, and nutritionally, how beef is great for you. It's a pretty exciting time on our farm right now, lots of things changing.
So exciting. And again, we just want to thank you all for joining us live, and thank you to the ones that are tuning into the recording. We greatly appreciate you taking the time to learn more about the beef industry, learn more about our story. As both ladies mentioned, you know, we're here to tell our story, and that's really the role of the Beef Checkoff. So we work in Pennsylvania as well as within the Northeast region. So we're here as a resource. So if you're watching this video, you're likely tuning in from either the Pennsylvania Beef Council website or the Northeast Beef Promotion Initiative website. So don't hesitate to ever reach out if you have any questions or concerns. We're here to answer those for you all. So with that, we'll just thank Amy and Sallie for showing us around and telling us about the differences of Pennsylvania and Colorado. So with that, we greatly thank you both for sharing your stories and taking time out of your days to share everything with us.
Well, thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thanks for visiting the farm today.